Good evening, everybody, or good afternoon, depending on where you are. Happy to see some familiar names and faces on the Zoom here. And here we're talking tonight about Israel's 2005 disengagement from the Gaza Strip. Essentially, the story is how Gaza became an autonomous unit, which is now controlled by Hamas, and sorry, now up until a week ago, controlled by Hamas. Things are changing by the minute. Um, and this was a decision from Israel's government to leave the Gaza Strip and leave it completely in Palestinian control. So we're going to talk about how that happened in detail. But first, I want to share with you a just a little story about, excuse me, just fixing the slides. Okay, a story about this man. His name is Avad Yosef, or Rabbi Avad Yosef. He was born in Iraq. When he was born, his name was not Avad Yosef. When he was born, he did not have a last name because he did not necessarily have last names in Iraq around the early 20th century. Last names are kind of a Western invention, and his family makes it over to his first name was Ovadia. His family makes it over to Israel. His father sits in some office of the Sochnut in charge of the Aliyah here in Israel, and they say, "Well, welcome to Israel, but if you're going to live in Israel, which is a modern country, you guys need a last name. I have a great last name for you guys. You guys are Eastern Jews. You guys are from Iraq. Here's your last name. Your last name should be Mizrahi. I like that name." But his father, Ovadia's father, didn't like that name, and he decided to make their last name Ovadia. In which case, the man in front of us on this slide, his name would have been Ovadia. He changed his name to Ovadia Yosef, just to try to get a sense of what kind of world this person came from, right? He comes in from Iraq, and he spends his youth studying in yeshivot and studying Torah and studying Talmud. He was a genius with photographic memory, and eventually he becomes a major rabbi in Israel. Now, in 2005, when Ariel Sharon government wanted to have this disengagement and build support for leaving Gaza, one of the things that was happening is that you had military generals coming to Rabbi Avad Yosef's house and sitting with him and poring over maps to show the strategic reasons for leaving Gaza and these long discussions. Now, why did they have to go to his house? They weren't just looking for rabbinic wisdom, but he was also head of a large political party, at the time large, now less so, called Shas. And so there was political implications to having his support for the program. But also, he would presumably have been a sympathetic ear. Rabbi Yosef, during the Oslo process, in which the Israeli government was negotiating with the Palestinian Authority, the PLO, and the Palestinian Authority, in order to exchange Jewish territories for peace, right, and ceding parts of the land of Israel for a Palestinian state for the sake of a peace treaty with Palestinians. It was largely dividing the country. In general, people who were identified as religious Jews were more usually against it, but Rabbi Yosef was in favor. Rabbi Yosef had a very, very strong position that when it comes to saving lives, that takes a primary importance. And even at the cost of ceding, large chunks of Israel, it's a right move to do. And so they meet with Rabbi Yosef to try to get his support for this program. And Rabbi Yosef hears what they have to say. And now I have a little clip over here of a speech that he gave. There's English translation in the top left corner over there of his approaches to the disengagement after he heard it from the Israeli political brass. Excuse me. I just want to make sure that can you guys see the video screen before I start? Yeah, okay, great. Okay.
But the sound is not coming through.
Okay, sound's not coming through. Okay, so let me just
You have to share with sound. You have to click.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank God it's been a little while since I've been giving a Zoom class, so I'm very, very happy to realize that I forgot that. My apologies for everybody waiting over here. So I'm just going to share the screen, share with sound, optimize for video. We are ready to go. Here we go.
كلنا ها ونحن تيجي ما إلي أنت فاتش لنا عيدة التنور عيد وجينا نفراس هنا فراس كبدنا هنا برحنا وتن محمد سامع عسير زي بحبرون محمد سامع عسير زي بير شيبة أتعزت بسهولة لحدوتين يمسكوني عن إسرائيل.
So you see, Rabbi Yosef, he was opposed to the program, not in principle because he was in opposition to the idea of having giving land for the sake of peace. He's already stated his support for such a thing. It's because he felt this specific idea of just Israel leaving Gaza without any sort of negotiated settlement would just give a message that terrorism works, that they're fleeing from terrorism, and it would have inspired more terror as if Israel carried this through. Now, obviously, not everybody agreed with this, and there are some people who thought, not like Rabbi Yosef, they thought that he would, if with Israel leaving Gaza, would be a great idea, but did have some long-term security advantages. And for that, I'm going to now again share with you some clips of other positions, other speeches given at the time about the from Israeli politicians discussing who supported the disengagement and what they thought was going to happen once Israel left Gaza, and speaking to their concerns, the concerns of other people who thought it was a security risk or giving into terrorism.
יש טענה שיהיה איום ובריחה, איום על יישובים בנגב. אני עוד לא שמעתי טענה מגוחכת כזאת.
ההתנתקות טובה לביטחון. הנה נעמו כאן אנשי הימין ודיברו על הקסאמים שיעופו מכאן ולשם.
So over there we have some politicians over there who are in supporting the program, and they say, okay, how ridiculous it is that people think that sometime in the future will lead to people in the Negev fleeing, that idea that Qassamim, that rockets would fly over Israel. I cut the video a little bit short for the sake of time, but the video actually goes on for about another 60 seconds. In retrospect, right, we're standing here in 2023. It's very, very clear that what happened in summer of 2005 when Israel left Gaza started off a chain of events that resulted in, one of the greatest tragedies in Jewish history, one of the worst days in Jewish history, which was took place just over a month ago here in Israel. And what I want to do here for the next little while is track what the goals were, how this happened, and how it went about. What are the decisions making to think that leaving Gaza was a good idea? Meaning that what we have here is we have an Iraqi-born rabbi with no military experience who's presented with this program, and to him it was self-understood at the time, as was to a lot of people, that this program, which again was not a peace treaty, it was more of a blanket retreat from the Gaza Strip, was not going to cause any was not going to save any lives. It was going to just encourage terror and danger, which indeed what happened. So, which seems kind of, that's what happened. It might seem obvious in retrospect. And the question is, what were people thinking at the time? And how did the Gaza Strip end up the way it is? And what were the plans for this disengagement? And why did people think that it would succeed? Okay, so first, let me just talk a little bit about go over what the Gaza Strip is, a little history. I know some of you guys have been in some other classes, so some people here may be familiar with what I'm about to say, but and in any case, I'm going to now just do a quick history of where, geographically, where it is in significance in Israel. Okay, so the Gaza Strip is over here conveniently on this map circled in red. It's on the southwestern side of Israel. That yellow strip of land right over there is circled in red. Jews have been in Gaza Strip since the beginning of Jewish history. Those of you guys who are following the weekly Torah readings this time of year know that Abraham spent time in Gaza and Isaac spent time in Gaza, and there are Jewish communities in Gaza throughout the classical period and the medieval period. But when you get to more the modern period, there was not so many Jewish communities in the Strip. There are Jewish communities a little bit outside, but not so many Jewish communities right inside the Strip, which led to that when Israel, after the 1948 war, when Israel fought, different countries in the War of Independence, this is what the map of Israel looked like after the War of Independence. Essentially, you have the pink over there was the state of Israel post 1948. We have the green in the middle there. That was Jordan, which is, it's called the West Bank, or in Hebrew, we sometimes call it Yehuda and Shomron, or whatever it is. But that was controlled by Jordan over there in green. And the blue on the left side over there is the Gaza Strip, controlled by Egypt. Yet after the 1948 war, even though some of the neighboring Arab countries claimed that they were fighting on behalf of the local Palestinians, when they did grab the land, they just kind of kept it in their countries. So the green becomes Jordan, and the blue on the border there with Egypt becomes the Gaza Strip. Now, this became hugely problematic for Israel in the years after the war. Israel was at war with Egypt, and Egypt allowed terror attacks to come in from the Gaza Strip into Israel. Do you guys like old-timey newsreels? Of course you do. Who doesn't? So I have a couple over here. Here is a video. I have a still photo, but some audio of a news report of David Ben-Gurion when he visited Israel. This was visited communities next to the Gaza Strip, which is again, the news moves so fast, it's hard for us to keep up. Anybody who has their microphone on or wants to unmute themselves, anybody here know what we call the area where the Jewish settlements are, and also Bedouin settlements as well, next to the Gaza Strip, or it used to be called
Gaza.
Otef Aza, translated to English as the Gaza envelope. This is already passé. In Israel, we don't use this term anymore, Otef Aza. It's now called Negev Hamaravi, the Western Negev. So I think there's a feeling among people in Israel that calling it Otef Aza, we're lumping together with Gaza and sort of separating it from the rest of the country. Now people in Israel, if you look in the media, it's usually called the Negev Hamaravi, the Western Negev. Back then it was Otef Aza, and there's a community in Otef Aza, and there was a wedding. And at the wedding, terrorists got in, and there was a massacre. And David Ben-Gurion, who was the prime minister at the time, comes to the community to visit. And here's a little newsreel going back to 1955.
דוד בן גוריון מגיע לפטיש, הכפר שנפל קורבן להתקפה רצחנית של מסתננים שרצחו צעירה ופצעו עשרות תושבים. שר הביטחון שומע פרטים על ההתקפה ומבטיח למנוע הישנות תקריות כאלה.
So 1955, so I'm not only sharing with you because it's a great news music, but in 1955, where you have a terror attack in these communities, and you have the promise from the minister, and the promise from the minister is to say, from Ben-Gurion as the prime minister, the reason I call him the minister here is also because he was the defense minister at the time, and he was saying that there was a terror attack, and we're going to do everything we do to stop the terror attack. I'm going to relate to a phrase here, a comment here by Jay, that he says that he said he's reading different news sources than me. Okay, so on Kan 11 and Kan 11, it's Otef Aza, not Negev Maravi. Okay, so I'm a Kan 14 guy, so maybe it's just different news things. We'll have to keep track of this and take a poll of what's used more, Otef Aza or Negev Maravi. But going back to our videos, there was another story, another one I'll show you, just another old video from 1956. And this was when another incident in the Otef Aza, there was a kibbutz next to Otef Aza, and there was attack by terrorists. Somebody was killed. They also mutilated his body. He had his eyes poked out. This is something that happens. It happened in 1956. It has terrible to say, but this also happened in 2023. The mutilation bodies and mutilation bodies in a specific way. Trivia question. Here's some dark trivia. First Jew to ever have his eyes poked out in the Gaza Strip. Anybody know the answer to this one? We'll hold this on. Getting some shaking heads. No, the answer to this one is Samson.
Dayan.
Here you go. Mike, Mike, you're going to say? Are you going to say Dayan?
Yeah.
No, Dayan.
I said Moshe Dayan, but
yeah, I think he got shrapnel. I don't know where it was. Dayan's like, but Samson from the Bible was taken to the Gaza Strip. Okay, this is just some of these things have bizarrely long history. When we talk about certain of these very, very strange things that are happening now. But what I'm going to show you now, this is a video from, and it's Moshe Dayan speaking. Now it's a picture but it's also translated to English. This is from a podcast that I'm sure some of you are familiar with called Israel Story. Israel Story, since the war broke out, is giving very lots of stories related to the recent conflict. And this is a excerpt translated English of Moshe Dayan's speech in Kibbutz Nachal Oz, right on the border of the Gaza Strip. It was very hard on October 7th. It really decimated. And this was his speech after a terror attack there in 1956.
How did we shut our eyes to the reality of our fate? How were we unwilling to see the destiny of our generation in its full cruelty? Have we forgotten that this small band of youngsters settled here in Nachal Oz carries upon its shoulders the heavy gates of Gaza, beyond which hundreds of thousands of eyes and arms huddle together and pray for the onset of our weakness so that they may tear us to pieces? Has this been forgotten? For we know that if the hope of our destruction is to die out, we must be armed and ready, morning and evening. We are a generation of settlement, and without the steel helmet and the maw of the cannon, we shall not be able to plant a tree or build a house. Our children will not have lives to live if we do not dig shelters, and without a barbed wire fence and a machine gun, we cannot pave paths or drill for water.
So there's a question in the chat, when was that taking place? That sounds like 5 minutes ago, and it was in 1956. In 1956, these were Moshe Dayan's telling the communities on the Gaza border and the Otef Aza that they have to be constantly aware, because the people in Gaza are just waiting for their chance to pounce and attack. Because of that constant threat from Gaza, Israel in 1967, when they had their preemptive strike on Egypt in the Gaza in the Sinai Desert, they also took over they also took over. Sorry, my apologies. They also took over the Gaza Strip. Here you go, and here's a map before and after the 6-Day War. You can see before the 6-Day War, we have Egypt focusing here on Egypt on screen left, where Egypt had the Gaza Strip before the war, going all the way up there, and lots of terror attacks going from Egypt. They also had the Sinai Desert, which was more of a military, starting off places for military attacks for Egypt. Israel took over the entire Sinai Desert in the 6-Day War, as well as the Gaza Strip. And after the 6-Day War, the Gaza Strip is now in Israel's hands. So Israel controls it, and right after Israel took control in the 6-Day War of the Gaza Strip and the Sinai Desert, Israel decides to offer immediately to Jordan and Egypt this idea that we'll give back all the land we took over for a peace deal. And it took some time. It took another war with Egypt and the Yom Kippur War. But eventually, in 1978, we finally get to a peace treaty with Egypt. This is over here, the Camp David Accords with Begin and Sadat. And they negotiate to give back the territory that Israel conquered in 1967, except for the Gaza Strip. Why did Israel not give the Gaza Strip back to Egypt in 1967? So there are two reasons for this. One is that Israel didn't want to give it, and number two is Egypt didn't want to take it. Why did Israel not want to give it back? So you have to put ourselves in the mindset of Israel in 1978, which was not the mindset necessarily of Israel now as it relates to Egypt. I mean, we just finished fighting 2 wars with Egypt within like an 11-year period. And Israel didn't trust Egypt to have such a close proximity to the border. The Gaza Strip was used as a base for terror attacks since, as we saw before in our stories with Ben Gurion and Dayan from before. And Israel wanted security control. On Egypt's side, they wanted the Sinai Desert back. The Sinai Desert is a great place. What does the Sinai Desert have? I don't know if anybody here has been to the Sinai, It's a beautiful, beautiful place. You've got beaches and you've got snorkeling. You also have lots and lots of oil over there. And Egypt definitely wanted the Sinai Desert back. They did not want the Gaza Strip back, which is also a very, very pretty place with beaches and snorkeling, but also had a large number of Palestinian nationalists and Muslim extremists that Egypt did not necessarily want to deal with. So in the peace treaty, when Israel gives back the entire Sinai Desert to Egypt, the Gaza Strip remains part of Israel, so to speak. Looking at this map over here, you can see the peace with Egypt, that whole green area of the Sinai Desert goes to Egypt. There was a debate over one little area in the Sinai Desert, Taba, in the top of the Sinai, over that was part of Israel or Egypt. They didn't figure that out until a bunch of years later. There was a casino there that was originally in Israel and got switched to Egypt, but the Gaza Strip is still in Israeli control. To take a minute out about what that means, Israeli control, it's similar to what we have in the West Bank now, meaning it's not Israel fully, in the sense that Israel has not annexed the West Bank, and at the time they did not annex the Gaza Strip. It was part of Israel in the sense that Israel was in charge of security. It was part of Israel, as we're going to see, that Jewish citizens who live there could get Israeli citizenship, but not fully part of Israel. And that's sort of in the way that the West Bank is now. And it was stuck in that sort of in-between state. One more thing about this idea of the peace treaty with Egypt was the most important, one of the big things that they discussed with the peace treaty with Egypt was this thing called the Philadelphia Corridor. Go Birds. The Philadelphia Corridor, which is on the border of the Gaza Strip and Egypt. And it was very, very important for Israel that they have that black line, that bottom black line over there, which is sort of to the left side over here, that Israel full control over that, because their concern was that Egypt, which again, at this time was still a little bit of officially had a peace treaty, it was freshly minted, and were very skeptical of Egypt. And they wanted to make sure there was control of the border there, so things cannot be smuggled from Egypt into Gaza. It's worth noting that in terms of our relationship between Gaza and Egypt, it's a little bit tricky. Meaning, we have what's our relationship, Israel's relationship with Egypt. So we have peace with them. That's great. There was a period for a few years that I see some younger people on this Zoom who might not remember this, but anybody who's over the age of, let's say 25 probably remembers this, when an extremist Islamic group called the Muslim Brotherhood took over Egypt for a few years, in which case it was a very scary time that you have this border between Egypt and Gaza. And that's why it was deemed at the time that it's very, very important that Israel maintains security control of the Philadelphia corridor. So this is the post Yom Kippur, the post Camp David Accords world, where Israel controls the Gaza Strip on a military level. Okay, as Israel controls a military level, what starts happening is settlements start to pop up all over the Gaza Strip. These are Jewish communities. You can see lots of names over here of different places. The biggest one is right there in the middle, called Neve Dekalim. As a group, these are called Gush Katif. Gush is like a block. So the block of Katif is harvesting, the harvesting block. These were agricultural settlements we'll talk about in a minute. Jewish settlement starts to settle. And just as now in the West Bank, we have Jewish settlements. Now, why do people settle these areas, these contentious areas? And there are personal reasons and there are national reasons. This is something which is a larger discussion, but it's worth noting over here that for our purposes, besides the fact that there is, Jews want to live in a place where Jews always wanted to live, and there's biblical connections, there's historical connections. As on a national level, there is a military advantage to having settlements. When there are, which was the case, when Israel was in charge of security in Gaza, it's much easier to have military bases and military supplies when you have people living there and you have places to go and these communities to rely on. And this is why the Israeli government's relationship to settlements in the West Bank and Gaza is a little bit of a tricky conversation to have. But even left-wing governments in Israel between 1967 and between, let's say, 1967 and the Oslo Accords, they either encourage actively or tacitly settlements in some ways, at least after the fact when people settle, because it does serve an important security function. Here's another picture over here. You can see here, maybe it's not such a super clear picture, but it's a satellite photo. And the blue and the light blue there, those are Jewish settlements. So most of them are towards the south over there. You have one Jewish settlement there in the north, but you have you see this in the area where many Jewish settlements are starting. What was life like in these Jewish settlements? Okay, of all the things I could show you, here's something. Why not a basketball game in I think this is I don't even know which one it was. We'll say Neve Kalim. Okay, just get a sense of life in a settlement in Gush Katif and Gaza in the years between post settlement, which and before the disengagement.
משחק היום בנווה דקלים, קבוצת נווה דקלים ונצר חזני. כל שנה נצר חזני מועמדת לאליפות, זה אחת הקבוצות החזקות שבטורניר במשך כל השנים, מהיום הראשון של הטורניר. אותו דבר גם נווה דקלים.
Okay, a high school basketball tournament. Not the most important thing that's happened in Jewish history, but just to give a sense that these were completely functioning communities with, everything that communities entail. Synagogues, place of work, which we'll get to in a minute, and JCCs and high school basketball tournaments. And these were the Jewish settlements that were in or there in Gush Katif. What, in terms of what else did these settlements do? They were mostly known as agricultural settlements. They grew agriculture largely in these very, very sophisticated greenhouses or hothouses. There's a picture of one here, which has some, you can see this one specifically grows some flowers. That little strip in Gush Katif, in Gaza Strip, actually 15% of all of Israel's agricultural exports, which is worth $200 million a year, came from this little area in Gush Katif. So you're talking about these farming communities. There's sort of this culture where there are a lot of them are on the beach, like surfing and farming, and that's what people are doing in Gush Katif in these settlements as years go by. Okay. Next stop on our journey is the Oslo Accords. Okay, I could talk about this picture for a while, but I won't. There's lots of interesting things in this picture. If you want to analyze it, maybe JNF class, 45 minutes of me ranting about this picture. Look at the smile on Arafat's face, and that, I don't know what that look is on Rabin's face right there. We will later learn that Yitzhak Rabin, he went to the signing of the Oslo Accords, which is a peace agreement with what was becoming now the Palestinian Authority, was formerly the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, which was a terror group. And Yasser Arafat was going to become sort of the de facto chosen prime minister of Palestinian Arabs. And then he would negotiate a peace deal with Israel, in which he would rule, the Palestinian Authority rule over some debated how much territory in the West Bank and Gaza in exchange for peace. Yitzhak Rabin was a lifelong security person, defense minister, general in IDF. He did not want to shake Yasser Arafat's hand. That was taken by surprise. You got to see his not super happy face. Also, wardrobe choices. Something else to talk about over here in this picture. Bill Clinton and Yitzhak Rabin, they're wearing suits. Yasser Arafat, what's he wearing? It's like, his army costume. Anyway, but this is the negotiated, the idea that we're going to have a negotiated settlement with the Palestinian Authority, and it would look something like this, more or less. Okay, two parts to the Oslo Accords that we have in this situation. The red over here is what's going to be part of a Palestinian state. If you look at the West Bank, that's tricky enough because the West Bank is that you have over there, sort of the Palestinian state is a little bit choppy. But it's sort of in the same area. It can sort of see if you squint and you look at the red, you can sort of see how that could become a state. But Gaza Strip is all the way on the other side of the country, because really, when we talk about the Palestinians in that potential Palestinian territories, you're talking about two totally different areas, right? The West, they're not that far away as a drive. They're only about an hour away if you take a direct drive. But the West Bank and the Gaza Strip are completely separate. But both these were supposed to be part of the Palestinian state in the Oslo Accords. Here's a cute little thing I found. This is just I think it's from Wikipedia. This is Highway 35. This goes 10 minutes from my house, and now it's known as Highway 35. But back in the day when it was built, and up until a few years ago, there's still signs up called Highway 2. That it wasn't an Israeli highway. It was originally supposed to be a Palestinian highway. This was supposed to connect the Hebron, which would be the southern part of the Palestinian state, to the Gaza Strip. You can see now it ends up in Ashkelon, but it could have slanted a little bit south over there and connect Hebron to the Gaza Strip. And that would have been the road, the Palestinian road that sort of cuts in the middle of the country. So you have these two separate areas that are all supposed to be under the Palestinian Authority control after peace treaty. What actually happens over here? What happens over here? And I see we're running a little bit getting close to the end, so I'm going to have to run through a couple things. Second Intifada happens without getting to the background. The Oslo Accords did not completely succeed in carrying through, and there was a terror uprising. Now, how does terror uprising affect the communities in Gush Katif in the Gaza Strip? It affected them pretty terribly, because as the Talmud says, every single life is a world. And if you destroy one life, it's destroying an entire world. But if you look at the numbers here, it's hard not to think now, in 2023, comparing these numbers to the numbers that we just saw a month ago. We have over here, it's a list of terror attacks. We have an 18-year-old killed and 5 teenagers fatally shot, a school bus bombed, another suicide bombing. And you have regular terror attacks in the Gaza Strip. And we're a little bit stuck here because at this point in Israeli history, the government, which is now run by Ariel Sharon, gave up on negotiated settlement with the Palestinians for peace, or specifically Yasser Arafat and his government for peace. He thought Yasser Arafat was not sincere in his negotiations. He thought he was a terrorist. There was actually military conflict between Israel and the Palestinian Authority. And the idea of negotiated peace treaty is finished, and that is not happening. So the decision now at this point in history by Ariel Sharon is, at the second Intifada, is now to have something called the disengagement plan, and that is where we are picking up now for the next 10 minutes. We're going to talk about the disengagement plan. The disengagement plan was not a negotiated peace settlement. It was not a deal with the Palestinian Authority or Hamas, we haven't talked about yet, or anybody else. The idea of the disengagement was Israel was going to pick up and just leave the Gaza Strip. Now, that sentence, picking up and leaving the Gaza Strip, could be understood in lots of different ways. It could mean that settlements would be evacuated by the Gaza Strip, which is some people in Ariel Sharon's government thought that's what Ariel Sharon meant. We're just going to get the Jewish settlements out of there to protect them from Palestinian terror. That's definitely one possibility. Another possibility is that Israeli soldiers would leave much of the Gaza Strip as well, and they would go maybe just to certain border areas. And that's what other people in Ariel Sharon's government thought he meant. But what Ariel Sharon actually really meant was that all the settlements and all the soldiers would completely leave the Gaza Strip, including, we'll just show you a picture we saw before, the Philadelphia corridor, meaning the entire area would be completely devoid of all military personnel. Why would this? What was the thought behind this? So let's hear a quote from Ariel Sharon, and we'll look at a couple sources and see what his idea was in doing so. Here is a Ariel Sharon speech to the Knesset. Sorry.
אינה באה במקום משא ומתן, היא צעד הכרחי מאין כמוהו במציאות שאינה מאפשרת כעת משא ומתן אמיתי לשלום.
So Ariel Sharon his idea of this engagement was not a peace deal. It was to spite a peace deal. We're not going to negotiate with the Palestinians, but we're going to do things on our own terms. We're completely going to pull out. What are the advantages of pulling out of the Gaza Strip? Why would he do such a thing? What are the possible advantages of pulling out of the Gaza Strip? So a few possibilities. Sorry, I'm having a real trouble with my screen sharing over here. I'll just talk for a minute. One possibility is that it would prevent soldiers and settlers from being killed. We can't protect our soldiers through a negotiated peace settlement. That was Ariel Sharon's belief at the time. So why not protect them by getting them out of harm's way, getting them out of the Gaza Strip? We pull them out of there, and then they can't have rockets shot from nearby villages. You can't have IEDs put into highways. You can't have machine gun fire into the settlements onto soldiers. So maybe that's one way to protect them. And that is one idea that Ariel Sharon did raise, that you had why it would be important that you have why disengagement should happen, to protect the security of the soldiers and the settlers in Israel without relying on negotiated settlement with the Palestinians. That's number one. Another answer that was given, which was I'll show you guys in a minute just a quote, and if you want to read it in depth, you can look at you can follow, this will be posted somewhere, a quote from Ehud Olmert, who was his assistant prime minister, who said it's really about demographics. It's about demographics that we eventually might want to, what's our possible solutions to the Palestinian conflict? Well, maybe we want to annex certain lands, but we can't annex the Gaza Strip because there are about 9,000, 10,000 Jews. There are between 7,000 and 9,000 Jews, and a lot of Palestinians. How many? We still don't know to this day exactly how many. Say 1 million. I've heard people say 2 million. A lot of Palestinians there, a lot less Jews. So let's get the Jews out of there. So because there's no long-term plan. Number three possibility is maybe there would be a diplomatic benefit. And over here, we have the response of the White House. At the time, the president was George Bush. And George Bush wrote about, in response to the disengagement, he said something about Israel, which is as follows. And I'll just read what's in bold. In light of new realities on the ground, he said there should be, sorry, I'll start from the beginning. There should be a final peace settlement with the Palestinian Authority. Israel must have secure and recognized borders. And in light of new realities on the ground, including already existing major Israeli population centers. So at the same time as this engagement, George Bush gives out the statement, which was sold by Ariel Sharon. The way Ariel Sharon understood it was that America was supporting the annexing of major settlement blocks in the West Bank. So now America disputes that's what it really meant. Later, Condoleezza Rice, who was the Secretary of State at the time, said that's not exactly what they meant. There is between 0 and 1 American governments that supported any annexation of the West Bank, depending on how you understand what happened over there with the Trump administration, which is a bit of a mess. But that's generally not American policy. But Sharon was selling it as this is a big diplomatic win. We are showing that we want peace by leaving this area, and it's going to get us some world support. So that's 3 possible reasons why Ariel Sharon might have thought that this would help. Now, the problem is that we have is that let me just take a step back. So I teach in Alexander Muss High School in Israel. I very much enjoy it. And up until I've been teaching disengagement since I got there about a year ago or so. And a lot of it was talking about sort of the humanitarian aspect of it. What's it like? What gives the government the right, or what are the problems and challenges of telling 7,000 people, 8,000 people, leave your homes, leave your communities? In light of what happened 2 weeks ago, what I'm talking tonight about is mostly about security. But I do want to bring a little bit about this, about the sort of the dilemmas of the time, because I was in Israel in 2005. I made Aliyah in 2004, and it was a time of great tension and great stress between people who supported this engagement, people who were against the disengagement, and most of all, people who lived in these communities that were threatened to be uprooted. And obviously, in your community, think about your own communities. what do you have in your communities that make your home so important? So I was going to throw out over here. I have three pictures over here. On the left is a synagogue. In the middle, you have the hot houses I spoke about before, which is essentially their jobs. And to the right is cemeteries. And the question is, what do you do with all these things? You have a synagogue. Do we leave a synagogue standing, or do we destroy a synagogue? Can you actually ask Israeli soldiers to go to bulldoze a synagogue, right? Can Jewish soldiers actually do that, bulldoze a synagogue? And these are the dilemma that they had. What about these hot-houses that are worth a lot of money? These hot-houses that are worth so much money, do we hand them over to the Palestinian Authority, which we are not in great diplomatic relations with, or do we destroy them? But if we want the Gazans to have a future, why not leave these hothouses that are worth millions and millions of dollars and have such great technology so they can start developing their own industry? What do you do about that? And finally, the third one I have here is a cemetery in Gush Katif, right? The cemetery. Who's buried in your local Jewish cemetery? Local Jews, which may include your people's parents. It may include their children, God forbid, soldiers that fell, and these people are all in these areas. And these are highly debated. If we're going to take everybody out and make people leave their homes, what do we do with these things? Decisions made by the Israeli government about this was, okay, the synagogues, we're going to leave them standing. We're going to take out the Torahs. We're going to leave them standing. We're not going to have Israelis bulldoze synagogues. In terms of the hothouses, they were going to leave them. They actually got private donors to buy them, so that people got paid back for their investments, and they would be given over to the Palestinians so they can start a strong economy. And the cemeteries, everybody was disinterred. Everybody was taken out of the cemeteries and moved to cemeteries in Israel, which you can imagine is a highly, highly traumatic thing to see for the people who were there. What actually happened afterwards? So here's a picture of before. That's before. Here's the after pictures. You hear cemeteries being disinterred. When they dig up a coffin, this would have been a military cemetery over there, because you can see by the coffin for the Israeli flag. The middle pictures are hothouses. The hothouses were all raided and pillaged and destroyed, as were to the right the synagogues that were just destroyed right away. They were destroyed by mobs immediately following Israel leaving. We don't have time now to show you guys a couple of videos of people actually being taken out of their homes. But that is something that was also a bit traumatic. Okay, we'll do 20 seconds of the idea of, here's Israeli soldiers, right? Israeli soldiers have to walk in. They're sworn to protect, they're to protect people. This is not what they necessarily signed up for. And you have families sitting here waiting for these soldiers and challenging the soldiers about taking them out of their homes. This is a very, very traumatic thing. It may or may not, at the time there was a debate about whether it was necessary security-wise. And if security-wise, it can somewhat justify this sort of humanitarian difficulties. But this was something that was very, very really part of Israeli society, and it's a real trauma at the time. Let's flash forward a little bit. When you guys look at the recording, you can see these on the slideshow. But George Bush, he had an idea, which was that one of his goals of his presidency, which is called by media and others, I don't think he ever used this term, the Bush Doctrine, which was to spread democracy through the Middle East. After Israel left Gaza, the Palestinian Authority was in charge of the West Bank and in charge of Gaza. President Bush pressured the Palestinian authority to have elections for the sake of democracy. They had elections, and guess who won the elections? Hamas. Hamas won the elections. And the Palestinian Authority not just step aside and say, sure, Hamas, you won the elections, you guys win. They were fighting, and a little bit of a civil war broke out, both in the West Bank and in the Gaza Strip. In the West Bank, the Palestinian Authority maintained control. And in the Gaza Strip over here, you can see this picture of Hamas taking care of Gaza and the Palestinian territories. Hamas takes over, and from there until now, the story has been that the whole idea of the Gaza Strip is completely devoid of not only Israeli settlements, but Israeli security, controlled by a terror organization, and with no access into the Gaza Strip until about a week ago. Just to show you one implication of this, Ariel Sharon had a stroke. He was in the hospital for a long time. At his funeral, Gaza militants fired rockets after Sharon burial. So Israel leading the Gaza Strip and the subsequent taking over by Hamas start to lead to the terror that we have now. Now, I want to say the last couple minutes here, I want to speak specifically about Hamas and how Hamas perceive this. And for this, we have to talk about who Hamas is and how they view the world. And through this lens of viewing the world, how they viewed the disengagement. So over here, we have the Hamas charter translated into English. And it talks about how other countries and expansionists try to take over Palestine, but it belongs to them. And it says, if you look in the second paragraph, expansionists have more than once put their eye on Palestine, which they attacked with their armies to fulfill their designs on it. Thus, it was the Crusades that came with their armies, bringing with them their creed and carrying their cross. They were able to defeat the Muslims for a while, but the Muslims were able to retrieve the land only when they stood under the wing of the religious banner. And they fought for almost 20 years, and at the end of the Crusades were defeated, and Palestine was liberated. They see that Palestine is a Muslim land, and foreigners come in, and all they have to do is fight back, and the foreigners will leave. Continuing, there's only one way to liberate Palestine. There's no doubt about the testimony of history is one of the laws of the universe and one of the rules of existence. Nothing can overcome iron except iron. And at the bottom paragraph over here, it talks about the present Zionist onslaught that has also been preceded by the crusading raids from the West and Tartar raids from the East. The Zionists, the Jews, are just another one of the series of outsiders, interlopers, expansionists, colonialists, who are trying to take over Muslim land. And if they are fought, they will leave. This is what Hamas believes, which is why they reject any negotiations for peace, which is why their goal is. But the question is, what actually is their goal? Do they really think they can win a war against Israel? And the answer is sort of yes. They believe if they fight Israel enough, people will get scared, and the Jews will leave, and the Israelis will leave, just as the Crusaders and Tartars and anybody else left before them. All these people will leave. Here's just an excerpt from an article by an academic named Thomas Mitchell, and he said, explains over here that he said, a large Hamas banner read in Arabic, 4 years of resistance beat 10 years of negotiation. That this idea that they had enough terror attacks in the Gaza Strip, that in their mind, this is a this is confirmation of what they've been saying. Now the Jews are leaving, and they're running away. And if you think about what they tried to do now in the South, and their attacks in the South, on the one hand, you can say it doesn't make any sense. What do they think is going to happen? Oh, so they killed 1,000 Jews, they killed 2,000 Jews, they can sow terror. What's their end game? In their mind, just as Crusades left and just as other people left when things got too hard, we're going to pick up and leave. And that was confirmed for them during the disengagement. And which leads me to the final thing I want to say, which is, what actually happened? What happened on October 7th? And for that, I want to tell a story over here about these two brothers. Their name is Noam and Yishai Slotny. Noam and Yishai both lived in the Beersheba area, a little bit, about, 45 minutes away from the Gaza Strip, an hour away. And when they heard that communities in the Gaza Strip were under attack, they got in their car. Yishai only had a pistol. Noam had a little bit more weapons. And they get in their own private car and they drive to Otef Aza, to the Gaza border. And they go to a kibbutz they knew called Alumim. And at kibbutz Alumim, they start fighting terrorists that are there. And now there was a great tragedy, which 16 foreign workers who were Nepalese and Thailand were killed by Hamas terrorists. One soldier was killed, Jewish soldier was killed in the battle for Alumim, but nobody within Alumim was killed. Alumim was completely saved. And the reason that Alumim was saved is because this is what Hamas didn't understand about October 7th. If you read this reporting on Hamas, they really thought that when they would get in, they were going to take over not only the communities on the Gaza Strip, they would go maybe as far north as Ashkelon, large swaths of land. And what they weren't counting on is not only that Jews didn't run away, everybody, and it's not only these two brothers, it's so many stories you hear about this in Israel, ran to the battle. I know personally many people, whether they're soldiers, whether they're ambulance drivers, who the minute they heard what was going on, they got in, no orders from the army. There's a story about a helicopter pilot who, without any orders from the army, got into his helicopter and flew over there. And this idea that because we didn't flee from these communities, we didn't flee when we were under attack, we ran towards it. And because we ran towards it and fought, that's what saved the South. And that's why we're going to be able to continue with this operation. It's very, very difficult operations. I was talking to Nancy right before the class, and this is just life in Israel. I got here right in time, but I just came back from a funeral procession. Somebody in my neighborhood who was killed, a soldier, brave soldier in Gaza. And it's very difficult, but we are going to win. And the reason we're going to win is because all the Jewish people, we're not going to run, we're running towards it. And this is a way to think that at the time, what's this engagement? Was there a logic to it? Was there a military logic, defense logic? Was there a diplomatic logic? Of course there was. But something else that's going on is that in the perception of our enemies that we're just interlopers waiting to run, it was a confirmation of that. And a lesson that hopefully that they're going to learn now and never forget is that we're not going anywhere. And Israel is going to fight and defend ourselves and run to the danger when we have to. So my blessing is that our soldiers continue success. We should only hear good news from Gaza, and it should end with secure borders and peace for everybody in Israel and all the peace-loving people in the Gaza Strip as well.